Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Happy Easter, hopefully you're having a good weekend, and hopefully you're having a good time. It's time to do some War Thunder nostalgia looking once again. So, last week we started this series, and the whole point of this series is to kind of have a look back at random things that happened in the past, which kind of shaped War Thunder to this day. And this one that we're going to have today, we're going back about 10 years. If you don't know, Anton is the CEO of Gaijin. There is a few key figures that have been in Gaijin for the longest time. Anton Yudintsev is one of them. Kirill Yudintsev is another. They're twins, and they've worked together to build the company up to what it is today. And they've been around for a long time. They've made many other games, not just War Thunder, but what is interesting is War Thunder is kind of like their mainstay product. It's the one which, they focus on. And back in the day, like 10 years ago, even more, they used to do quite a few interviews talking about and promoting the game and going around with it. Nowadays, they're definitely more in the shadows, which is fair because they put the work in and now they can hire people to do all these things. So, therefore, it's just easier for them to focus on other stuff, such as being the CEO of a massive company, which is an international powerhouse at the end of the day. So, what we're going to do in this video is we're going to have a look at the interview. This was done on Chinese media. It was nearly lost, but luckily Dawg for Life, who is another YouTuber and also a person I've known for many years, has been able to archive it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to his channel so you can check out his stuff. He does War Thunder things, and as I said, I've known him for many years and I consider him a very good person to be about. So let's go around, let's have a look at this interview and see what it is all about from the early years. Now, to start with, there's a decent amount of Chinese stuff, obviously, so if you are Chinese speaking and you want to translate it, that'd be fantastic. I can give you some free games or something if you want to do that. So, there is a few other things I will need translated in the future, mainly from Cyrillic, but we'll see what goes on.
安坦在研究战争雷霆时，为了保证游戏数据的真实、专业乃至音效的逼真效果，甚至动用了真实的坦克、飞机、火炮。
One of the things to note at the start, we're going to go through a lot of these videos too, and also restoration that Gaijin did in the early days. But you know how a lot of the time we talk about how the sounds in War Thunder are kind of screwed up, and right now the kind of directional sound or the distance sounds are kind of screwed. Back in the day in 2011, when they were first starting out this game and sorting it out, guess what they were doing? They were actually recording real-life sounds from vehicles that were around, whether it be the Lancaster, whether it be the Panzer IV. They've also done a bunch of Japanese vehicles, which is why Japanese ground vehicles sounded really nice for the longest time, and a little bit out of place because they were so loud compared to everybody else. So they went to this amount of effort back in 2011.
In our case, because we tried to create really good music, we recorded orchestra, symphonic orchestras, and good composers, and we really trying to put a lot of efforts in music as well. But I still understand that some of the people will not hear our sounds. However, that's...
So, if you didn't hear that, all of the music in War Thunder was built for War Thunder, was done by live orchestras, which, let's say, costs a pretty penny. There was a lot of investment that went into this game before any return was made. You've got to understand that. And it was a huge project that they started off with so long ago, and it paid off. It really did. But imagine if it didn't. You've gone around the world to record all these sounds. You've gone around the world to put together music and create orchestras, and it's also pretty cool. You can still buy all that music, but it's just nuts the amount of effort that they've gone into just to make War Thunder unique compared to everything else.
Anton Udinsev 年纪轻轻就成为一家非常成功的网游公司的 CEO，
By the way, there's some hilarious pictures of Anton in here from the early years.
成为很多年轻人羡慕和崇拜的目标。可以用中国网络上一个非常流行的词来形容：高富帅。
Right, so one of the things we'll probably do in the future is we might look at certain gaming conventions that our boy went to with his brother, because there are some funny pictures, especially from Japanese ones and also from good old Russian ones and also German ones, where, you know, advertising is one of those things which is just wild, I think is probably the way to put it. And, you know, things were a lot more sexualized about 10 years ago, so it's quite interesting to have a look at.
那么是什么原因让他投入到游戏行业的呢？
First of all, I'm very flattered for being handsome and tall, especially. I've been making games starting from, I guess, 10th, 9th grade in the school. First of all, as a hobby, because I was a very passionate gamer. I played a lot of games. I still play a lot of games, I mean, but now it's more obvious. And I've decided that I will be able to make good game that is not yet available. Of course, it was a long time ago, and those days there were so many games that were not yet made, so it was like quite obvious you can make a game which is not yet available on the market. It was the very beginning of the whole gaming industry. I mean, generally gaming industry
Sorry, that was my computer.
Was for already like for 15 years, but that was mainly arcade machines. So PC and console gaming industry was only starting those days. It was the very beginning of the era. And so, because there were so many games which were not available, which I would like to play, I decided that I had to make them myself. I wasn't the only one. There were.
I love this. So a lot of people talk about the fact that when it comes to like the decision makers at Gaijin, or when it comes to the ideas that they put forward, they don't know what they're talking about. They have no experience, yada, yada, yada. Anton Udinsev and his brother and many of the others who have been at Gaijin for a long time started off as developers. So they started off as the kind of bottom rung in companies, worked their way up, decided to create their own companies, and then go forward. So their literal experience when it comes to, you know, business, when it comes to developing games, is from them learning and being developers. Right? So this isn't like a lot of other companies where they bring in CEOs, which are designed for more like management tasks and designed for more of that. This is a person who is homegrown within the system and then became a part of the system with his own company, which is really cool, and also why for a long time, for me, that was awesome. You know, that is something that generally kind of kept me really interested in War Thunder. The fact that a lot of these guys who were, you know, the kind of key decision makers when it came to the game were born and bred in the fires of development. They weren't, you know, people who were brought in or people who, you know, went to specific universities for specific degrees to be brought in to manufacture certain things. And now we're at the position where we're at with an incredibly successful game set up by these people. And also why over the years when it was so sad, because as I said, there's so many interviews in the early days where it talks to like Anton, Kirill, you know, good old Pavel, but Pavel's gone now. But they talk to them, and then they talk about, you know, what they're doing and what they would like to do. And at the end of the day, it was so sad to see so many people talk about, oh, well, they don't play their game, or they don't know what they're talking about. They're obviously not developers. Who are these decision makers? Why are they screwing everything up? And you know, oh, the game's gonna die if they keep doing these things. And I heard this stuff for years. Heard it for years. And all I remember was these interviews. All I remember was how ridiculous of a product War Thunder is compared to a lot of other stuff. And the fact that they were able to put it all together and make it work and push through was insane, right? It's just insane when you think about the cogs in the machine that had to fit together, especially when you have a look at the background of a lot of these guys. It's pretty amazing, right? And now, after so many years, a lot of people can sit down and realize that. But that wasn't the case for what felt like 5 or 6 years. I used to get very much lambasted for the fact of talking about these things and basically having at least a little bit of hope in the game, where many people just didn't, especially from the content creation side.
Few people shared my mindset, and we started to make games, first of all, as our own projects. Some of them were actually published, not by real publishers, but they were appeared in internet and on a piracy CD discs without, so we hadn't got any revenues at all. Although the game were very popular in Russia those days. So then I started working as a work for hire in a game development company as well.
Right. So as a teenager in school, he was developing games and not selling them, but literally like putting them on websites so people could have access to them. And they were already popular from that point. So this is like many years before this. This guy has been around for a very long time in this industry.
For obvious reasons. It was end of 90s in Russia. The economy wasn't that great, and there were...
So we're talking 25 to 30 years ago. Okay.
A lot of issues with the in the game development industry in general. The quality of management in general, not only the company I was working, but in general, wasn't that great. I guess the quality of the engineers was also not that great, but the difference was still significant. And I decided, me and my brother and our friend of ours, we decided that we need to start our own company to make games how we think should be made and what games we think should be made. Because we will, those days we were not able to find a good working company sharing our idea of how games should be made, what kind of games should we develop, and so on.
Imagine being so gangster where you basically just go, all of these other guys, they're just not doing what's right. I have a vision in my head what I think should happen, and I'm gonna go do it. Straight up the Bender line, right? And look at it now. It's pretty impressive. Like just as a thing, you know. And
so in the end of 2002.
And once again, this video was before all of the success of War Thunder, before all of the success of, you know, the other games that have been around. This straight up was, you know, in like, you know, 2011, 12, 13, right? So just to have this mindset is amazing.
We have found our company. I had some money saved, and so also I took a loan, and we've started a company. It was still a very risky project because game development in general is very risky. Game development when you don't have established partnership with a publisher or with a... Those days there was no Steam or Apple or Android, Google Play or any other ways where you can developer can just start selling their
no
games.
Distribution.
So you still had to find publisher, but pretty soon we were able to establish several connections with the publishers of different way and start working on the set-top box games for cable set-top box for cable television, and then PC games. The company was very small those days. It was like first 7 people, starting from 5 people, then 7 people, then 15 people. then 20 people, and we were like gradually growing each year. Natural growth is very often is slow, and very often it's painful, depending on, because you still need to earn money to do your business, and a lot of things were done by ourselves. I mean, in terms of game development. In 2006, the company was already pretty big. We were like 40 people, I guess.
The fact that a company of 40 people is pretty big, especially when it comes to game development. I feel like, so one of the things that's talked about a lot when it comes to game development is the idea of having like these massive teams around things, and how you need like a lot of people to do a bunch of different stuff. To be honest, the core development of a lot of games that you know is incredibly small. Especially when it comes to like niche games, or you know, games which are pretty popular, or like have their time in the sun. Like if you have a look at like Pal World, or if you have a look at Lethal Company, right? Lethal Company was pretty big for a few months last year, and still is pretty big. That's just developed by like one dude, right? And same with stuff like Sprocket. Sprocket's just one guy, and you can see how much these people can do with such a small amount of people. And the fact that 40 is seen as large at the time that he's talking about kind of proves that point. You'll be amazed how much just one individual person does in a company like this, especially when it comes to the game development side of this. Nobody is just doing one job. There is always like little things here and there that people are doing. Or if you're having a look at specific game modes, like if you think about like World War mode, or if you think about like Enduring Confrontation for Sim, there's probably only like one guy working on those. And that's like part of their job, and then they've got to focus on other things too. Which, you know, it would be nice to be able to hire more people to do these things, but it's a cost-benefit analysis. A lot of these guys, especially if they've been around for a long time and also know the software very well, are expensive as hell to to be able to salary and get indoors, which is why a lot of these companies now contract out to other places, like Gaijin does, especially when it comes to a lot of their models. A lot of them are like made out of house, and then they're developed in-house to fit into the game, because it just makes more sense to do that.
And we had we start working in several new directions. We make console game departments, we start making casual games, and we start making our own engine for... We're already making our engine, but we start working it on as a middleware. So later on, we have published our console games. Most of our console games were very successful, or just successful. And then we, even starting from 2007, I guess, 2007 or end of 2007 or beginning of 2008, we already had experience with the making military games, but we wanted to make World War II games. We will not be able to convince publishers into that, so we had to earn money ourselves. Until we succeeded, we earned enough money so we can self-fund our development and release War Thunder.
Once again, just
Fund is pretty high quality, high production value titles.
imagine just wow. Okay, so we talked about the fact that in the late 90s, right, when once again they were in Russia. Okay, if you've read about the 90s in Russia, it was not a nice place to be. At the fall of the Soviet Union, the economy crash. There are plenty of stories of very negative things happening to people. So these guys, especially the heads of, Gaijin, at least back then, were built out of that, right? So then the core group decided there's nobody who wants to develop the type of games we want to do. Okay, we'll just do it ourselves. We'll create a company. Oh, success. And then they're like, oh, well, we still have to work with publishers. So, there's still like this kind of barrier to them. saying in a couple of years, after making a ton of money, or well, not a ton of money, but enough to keep afloat, which is usually what happens when early businesses are around, you know, you become profitable later on, not like at the start. And then what happens? So you basically go, well, these publishers don't like the ideas that we're pushing through now. We're just going to do it ourselves. That's the whole story of Gaijin. And you can see that in War Thunder, like over the years. Oh, nobody else is doing this. Why is nobody else doing this? We should do it. Now that core idea, right, is something that is very hard for people to understand, right? And it's something that has to be there when you are trying to push the barriers of specific businesses. You cannot just do what everybody else does, especially when it comes to a product which is about keeping people interested and reinventing or just inventing new things. You have to keep people on like the treadmill to at least be interested in it. And that's what they were able to do for years and years and years. And it's just crazy to think about. And as I said, this interview was 10 years ago. And you've got to look back on it and think, okay, you know, they were able to do that for over 20 years.
So it took a lot of money and a lot of efforts to make it even till open beta, but we were able to succeed in that. And although no one in the industry, I mean publishers, online publishers, have believed in success of such kind of games, the history proved us being right and them wrong.
So basically, like, everybody said they couldn't do it. Everybody. And then they went and did it. And now look at it. Isn't that amazing? Like, just that core bit right there. Isn't that cool? That's why I really like looking back on these things. That there is just astounding. Absolutely astounding. And it means that now we can enjoy the game as it is now because of decisions like that, because of risks that were taken like that. And then people say to me like, oh, well, you know, that should it be sold to like a different development team, or, you know, should a different person start publishing it, or should Gaijin get bought up? I think no, because these are the people who are behind those decisions. These are the people you exactly want behind these. You know, risk takers who have been proven right over and over and over again.
Anton Udinsov 既是该进公司的 CEO， 又是多款游戏的研发主策。
These are some of the
公司
early
的产
things
品
in
多是军事载具模拟类
War
游
Thunder,
戏，
trailers
而
and
且
stuff.
都是二战题材，可见安场对二战是有很深的情结。
In general, we are Russian from Russia, and most of Russian people they feel deeply engraved by World War II history. USSR, Russia was a part of USSR those days, have made the most significant effort to finish that war, and a lot of our relatives, our grandfathers, mostly all of them, were either fighting on the war, on the front lines, or working in making planes, tanks, to make or other guns to make our army succeed. So it was a huge and really strong effort. Of course, in such times, it's also tragic because a lot of people died those days. But in the same time, a lot of heroic movements were made. A lot of new things appeared. It's general. It's not only for USSR. World War II was a world war, but of course Russian people know that a lot. From, I guess, like a few kilometers from the place I've been born, there was a a line, and there's still a monument there showing where the German tanks have been stopped, and it's very close to Moscow. So even since I was a child, and everybody else have been in that inspired by history of World War II, by heroes of World War II, and by tragic losses of World War II. So the reason why we wanted always, one of the reasons why we always wanted to make something about that, because we feel the history, we know the feelings, and we also can admire the power and the beauty of military vehicles. Because during World War II, there was, it's not very common information, but there are few thousands, I mean literally thousands, almost 4,000 of different types of planes, not units, but types of planes.
So, once again, the product of War Thunder is not just built because of money, and it's not because it wasn't just built because of profitability. Of course, a lot of these guys have ties to it, ties to the history of warfare, just like many of us have through our families or through many, through our acquaintances or through just learning about history. That's why the game was successful, not just because it was just about money and just about creating a product. It was the fact that it was ingrained in a lot of the guys who put in the effort in the first place. And I know nowadays that's something which is seen as like a secondary thing compared to like, profitability or, whatever you want to call it. But honestly, that is so important, right? When it comes to creating stuff over time. And this is just wonderful, It's just really nice to see that, that was a key part. And also, a lot of these guys know all of the history of the Second World War. It just depends on which angle you look at. Obviously, a lot of pretty much all the core guys at Gaijin at this time were Russian, and now, since it's an international company, they've been able to get a bunch of other perspectives in it and also expand the game from what it was back then, which was, I think there was like maybe 5 nations in there at the time. I think it was America, USSR, Germany, Britain, and Japan from an aviation point of view. I don't think there was other people at that time, but yeah. So they'd done all their research before this. You can see all the sound stuff with all the ground vehicles and the aviation vehicles, and the fact that they just know all of these different things. This is the CEO. This is not like a historian. This is not somebody who, is paid to get any of these things right. This is just from the CEO, where this isn't even part of his job, right? So he already knows all of these things.
Participated in that
that's crazy.
Period of time. A lot of new concepts, including jets, including radio, including radar systems, and a lot of other things were either invented during the World War II or being engineered and employed during World War II. So when you know something, when you feel something, you can do something really great of that. So it's one of our powers as a Russian developer and Gaijin in specific particular, that we can make a good war-themed and especially World War II themed game. So that was basically the reason. Again, I'm very flattered for being named as a good game designer, but obviously I'm not the only one and even not the main one. We have a big team and a lot of people on our team have been very passionate about the history of World War II, have participated in developing a lot of other games about World War II. So it is very natural to our company to make World War II game.
Crazy, isn't it? Like, once again, it's just everybody in there at least from the start, was all, ready to go for these types of things. And at the same time, like, that's why War Thunder was so successful at the start and why it's continued to be, because their focus was based on their passions and what they knew and what they went on. And then as it expanded, which, the game, even in its, like, when it came out in open beta, already had post World War II stuff in it. It already had a Saber, it already had a MiG-15, I believe. So overall, it was something that had already passed that scope, and it was going to, right? It was going to pass that scope, but the core of it, at least to start with, going around, getting all of this audio from all these planes, as you can see from the Sally B here, and also just many other parts, is just crazy, especially since they built games previously to War Thunder, like stuff like Wings of Prey, and also many others. I'd just like to thank Tullio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pieman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Alan Hacker, Ozzy Panzer, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Cam Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.